we're going to learn how to use Excel to count the number of times a certain value or level of a categorical variable occurs. And so we're going to use, as our example, the movie data file. And it's rather large, takes a while to load. I'm going to download this into Excel. And what we're going to do first is we're going to look at the variable sequel or franchise, and we're going to count the number of times we find movies that are either sequels or franchises. And so we're going to start off, I'm going to make a frequency table. So scroll all the way over here. And we'll call this variable sequel or franchise. Of course, the two values can either be yes or no. And we're going to put the counts, or sometimes it's called frequency also, how frequent these things occurred. And we're also going to want to compute what's called a relative frequency, which is just the percentage of the values. And I'm going to put down here total. So here's our table. And put a little border around that, make it look kind of nice. Okay. So now we're going to use the COUNTIF command. And what we want to do, if we go over here and we look at the variable sequel or franchise, first we want to look at the data, make sure all the values appear okay. So we can see it looks like there's only no's or yeses, but it's a very large data set. So let's go ahead and sort it first just to make sure that the data is okay. And of course, I don't have to use COUNTIF. I could literally count the number of n's and y's. Let's first of all make sure that there are just only n's and y's. So everything's looking okay. Okay. And we go back to the border. What we're really interested in seeing is if there's any values that aren't n's and y's, and right at this border here, we can see that there aren't. So that's good. Go all the way to the bottom. Okay, so our data looks fine. We don't have any invalid data values. So let's go ahead and use COUNTIF now to count the number of movies that aren't sequels or franchises. So I'm just going to go up here. And the COUNTIF command, we start off, always put an equal sign because we want Excel to return a value to us. There's counts in COUNTIF. Okay, so COUNTIF is going to be for text. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to highlight all the values that I want to search, starting at the first. And I'm going to use the Control-Shift down arrow, and I go all the way to the bottom. I check and make sure. Good, there's nothing else there. Now, rather than scroll back over to where I was, I'm going to work in the command bar right here, okay? And I'm going to type quotes, end quotes, with an N between it. And that should give us our answer. And actually, I wanted yes, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to change that to yes. And there we go. Now I want to repeat this command. I don't want to type it back in again. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste. And I'm simply going to change the yes to no. Again, this is not case sensitive. So for example, if I change this to small n, it wouldn't make any difference. That's one of the nice things about COUNTIF. And I'm going to go ahead and add these two. And I'm just going to double check to make sure I didn't miss any values. So the first row is a header. If there are 629 films, the data should end at row 630, and we see it does, so we done good. Okay. Now we're going to compute the relative frequency, and all we're going to do here is we're simply going to divide the frequency by the total number. And you can report relative frequency as a decimal or a percentage. I'm going to write it as a percentage because that's easier for us to understand. And go ahead and say 100% times this value divided by this value. I'm going to anchor the 629. I'm going to double click on it. And I'm going to hit F4. Whoops. That doesn't work. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and put the $sign on both sides. And what this will do is this will anchor this value, because I'm going to go ahead and drag it down. And when I drag it down, you notice it moves this value, the X4. So rather than using X3, which it did in this row, it uses X4, but it anchors this value right here. And finally, I'm going to round these off, okay? So maybe we only want, maybe we'll say 1 or 2 decimal places. So I'm going to highlight it. Let's just see how that works again. I'm going to highlight the cells that I want to change the number of decimal places. And you can actually go up here. If you go to Home, you'll see that there is an option where you can increase or decrease the number of decimal places. So I can just do this. Or I can right click, go to Format Cells, Number, and change the number of decimal places here. And I'm just going to keep it to 1 decimal place. And there we go. Now, one of the cool things about COUNTIF, let me show you something. Suppose, for example, we want to search to see how many horror films there were. Now, if you go to the genre, you notice that this is a little more complicated because horror does not exist by itself. Very often it's in a string with other characters. So one of the ways we can do this, suppose I just wanted the number of horror films. The way that we do this in Excel is we type equals and we do the COUNTIF exactly the way we've been doing it. But instead, we have what's called a wildcard character. So let me show you. So I'm going to do COUNTIF. Don't do COUNTIFs. COUNTIF. There's a difference. I'm going to go to the row where the genre was. You scroll over. This is a big file, so it's a little memory intensive for my machine, actually. There we are. Okay, genres. I'm going to click here, Control-Shift down. Notice it didn't go all the way down. The reason why is because there's a blank space. So I'm going to have to drag it myself. Control-Shift down will take you to the last cell before blank. So you might want to sort the column. That'll save you a little time. Or you can do what I did. All right. Now I want to search for the string horror. In other words, I want to count the number of cells where horror occurs anywhere in there. So first I'm going to type double quotes, and I'm going to type the wildcard character with this, which is an asterisk. And then I'm going to type horror. And again, it's case sensitive. It's not case sensitive, sorry. It's case insensitive. I'm going to put another asterisk because there might be something after horror. Horror may not be at the end, okay? And then put a double quote. So that's my command. And we go over here. We can see 125 out of the 629 films ended up having horror. So that's a nice thing to be able to do when the thing you're looking for is embedded in a string where there are other characters also. Okay, that pretty much does it for tabulating categorical variables.